Mm-hmm.
Davis. I'm the Managing Director of Changing Relations, and today I'm going to be in conversation with
Polly Turner, and I'm co-director of Changing Relations and a freelance artist.
So, Changing Relations is an education company that uses the arts to transform the way people think about gender stereotypes and relationship behaviours. We are really grateful to the Blimey team for inviting us to contribute a talk to the Blimey Lucretia series. And what we're going to be talking about today in conversation with each other over Zoom is our experience of working with themes of domestic abuse through the means of artistic co-production and how we have approached that in the light of coronavirus. So starting off with domestic abuse then, we've been working on the subject of domestic abuse for around about 6 years at this point. We initially developed a play which told the stories of local domestic abuse survivors here in County Durham. It was then turned into a film. It's called Make, Do, Amend. And this film came to the attention of the Bowes Museum, partly due to the family history of the museum founder, John Bowes. John Bowes' grandmother, Mary Eleanor Bowes, who is an ancestor of the Queen Mother, suffered horrific domestic abuse at the hands of her second husband, Andrew Stoney. And this was something that the museum were interested in linking with us about as we were starting on the trajectory of producing a new piece of work on the subject of domestic abuse called Us Too. Now, the whole point of Us Too was to shine a light on the breadth of people who can be affected by domestic abuse. It's something that doesn't respect class boundaries. So there we've got somebody who obviously is a royal ancestor, the ancestor of the Queen Mother and the grandmother of the founder of the Bowes Museum, who was affected by domestic abuse. It isn't something that only happens in one community or another community. So it was relevant for us to have this connection with the Bowes Museum. And in autumn 2019, the museum were planning to host an exhibition called The Power and Virtue, which was featuring as its central exhibit the Lucretia, I almost called it the Blimey Lucretia painting there, the Lucretia painting, which is a depiction of somebody who committed suicide as a result of the impact of having experienced sexual violence. Now, sexual violence is often a prominent element of domestic abuse. And so there was this thematic connection between the exhibition subject matter that the Bowes Museum were going to be hosting, as well as this personal family history linked to the museum and that subject matter of domestic abuse that our new work was going to be covering. Polly, that's a little bit about that connection with the Lucretia painting that obviously the Blimey team have also linked into with their own exhibition. Do you want to say a little bit about the element of co-production and collective practice and how our approach with Us Too also linked in with that Blimey approach of collective practice?
Yeah, so I have my little prompts here. Us Too. As Lisa said, we are an organisation that engages in socially engaged art, collective practice, co-production, or we call it participatory arts. Us Too was produced as a kind of on several levels as a collective practice project where by the participants, the 6 participants who shared their stories as part of our soundscape, they were interviewed by our researcher. Their recordings formed part of a verbatim testimony that was turned into a soundscape. So we worked with a soundscape artist, Rupert Philbrick, and he wrote an orchestral score responding to the stories, responding to the narrative of the testimonies that were shared with us, and then worked with the Cobweb Orchestra, who are a kind of community orchestra group based in the Northeast, and they produced a really beautiful and powerful score to accompany the soundscape. We also, it's the first time that we have worked in collective practice with the Bowes Museum and their exhibition. So the soundscape was available to listen to via Bluetooth headphones, and audiences were able to listen to the soundscape as a kind of an extra layer to the viewing of the Power and Virtue exhibition. So it was a really fantastic opportunity to be working with both, for us, the core of live stories from individuals, for them to be heard, to be working with a soundscape artist who we've worked with in the past, but an orchestral score was something completely new to us and to him, and to work with the museum in being able to share a kind of contemporary sound multidisciplinary piece of art alongside these historic paintings.
So that was us too, and that happened in 2019. Now, at the start of lockdown, we actually moved into a new piece of work, also on the theme of domestic abuse, didn't we? Which you've actually been managing the setup of throughout the whole of lockdown, called The Child's View. And our approach to collective practice or co-production has been slightly different with The Child's View. Do you want to just explain a little bit about what is the Child's View project, and how has our co-production process been slightly different in terms of this particular project?
Yeah, so as Lisa mentioned earlier, kind of our first piece of work was a live piece of theatre that was turned into a film, Make, Do and Mend, which was verbatim stories. So similar to us too, we worked directly with participants to share and record their stories, which was turned into a script. The way in which that was produced, professional actors learnt the exact intonation of the voices. They shared exactly what those individuals had said, but it anonymised the people who shared their story. With us too, as a soundscape, it was the actual voices of the individuals. The Child's View is a new project that we're developing, which aims to give a platform and a voice for young people's experiences of domestic violence, whether that is in their own relationships or in their relationships as a family. It's come out of the 6 years that we've been working in the theme of domestic abuse, working with professionals, working with teachers and young people, and really recognising that there is a space that they want to be able to share their stories, particularly valuable when relationship and sex education is coming into compulsory practice this September in schools, and thinking about all of those things that affect young people. So the Child's View is slightly different in that it's not a verbatim project. We are working with a group of young people up in Bensham. We are also working with lots of young people from different organisations to share their stories, but to create a collective narrative. So what we're producing is an illustrated book. So the young people themselves will be able to share experiences to help to create a collective narrative with a writer and an illustrator and also an animator that will create a resource to be used with adults and young people, particularly aimed at kind of secondary age young people, 11 to 18, or that little bit above, where their side of the story gets to come across. But yeah, for us, it's the first time that we always we have a multidisciplinary approach to art. We really value socially engaged art that works with individuals, but this is not about taking individual young people's stories and sharing them, but allowing them to inform a collective narrative that gives a broader story to be shared.
Yeah, and that's partly about demystifying the subject matter for teachers and other people who work with young people, isn't it? Because one of the things that we found is that lots of adults can be quite anxious about subject matter and anxious about triggering a trauma response from a young person who might be affected, when in fact our experience of talking to many both young people and adults who have been affected is that actually they'd rather there was a safe space to be able to talk about it. So we're very much wanting to use the artistic resources that we create here, the book and the animation, to give people confidence to be able to talk about it and to have a way into the subject matter with young people who might be affected. But at the same time, we really want to protect the identities of the young people who are involved for obvious safeguarding reasons. So obviously, from what we've shared are 3 pieces of work that we have previously produced and are currently producing on the subject of domestic abuse. Collective practice or participatory practice, whichever term we want to use to describe it, it's looked different from project to project, hasn't it? It's been expressed in a slightly different way. But through the lockdown, another key area of focus for us has been articulating our artistic policy as a company, which I know you've been doing with the support of Annabel Turpin at Stockton Arts. What would you say is the common thread about our participatory practice, even though it went from the project with survivors in County Durham to young people in schools and youth groups?
So for us, it's really important that we're not just an arts organisation that produces work to be kind of to just be looked at and disposed. It's really important the process of valuing and recognising and responding to stories being told by individuals, and to let their voices be heard. We don't just want to project our opinions because they're singular. So for us, there's always a kind of a twofold aspect in that we want to create really powerful, valuable, professional, artistic processes that mean something to the individuals who are sharing those stories. We work with professional artists from a range of different backgrounds. We want to give opportunities to lots of individuals to create that process, but also what that has as a result is we have some really powerful content for education and awareness raising that isn't just about being used as a kind of training tool, but we have found over the years so many more individuals, the kind of the continued story where individuals will share their stories who've seen the film or who have visited one of our exhibitions or who have attended a training or a talk, and it's about that kind of the longevity of a project. We aren't just producing art, we aren't just producing a singular resource, but for us it's about this continued journey where we have humans are at the heart of it, and we strive to try and challenge and change attitudes for better, healthy relationships for everyone.
Yeah, it's basically education through the arts, isn't it? And it's about recognising the power of the artistic medium to reach people here, which actually, when you're talking about trying to develop more inclusive, empathetic responses from people to others who have suffered, you can't just sort of go in through the brain. You need to have that emotional response, and that's why the arts are so fantastic for that. And so many people have commented to us about the power of feeling that they are hearing those real stories and getting an insight that they otherwise would not get. It's emotional, and that's really important. Do you feel like the lockdown has changed the way we work in any way?
Yeah, I mean, enormously. We've not seen each other. I think it's really an amazing time to reflect on all of the powerful sort of meaning behind her work that isn't just the outcome, but actually what comes along with that. And actually kind of we're often working in schools, and we've been unable to do that. We're often working towards an event, whether that's an exhibition, whether that's a screening, whether that's a training, and we've been unable to do that. But what we have been able to do, as Lisa said, is to really think carefully about our artistic policy, to think about how valuable the artists are that we work with to help us create the work, to really hone in on participatory practice. That doesn't just mean working with other people, it really means about giving voice and direction and leadership and power to the individuals and sharing their story and how they want that to be shaped. But it's helped us to create online content and to realise that we have audiences out there that aren't just attending our events, and to reach wider than our local community of County Durham and Bishop Auckland with us too. We were unable to share that soundscape in its full piece during lockdown, but we created an online campaign which used smaller excerpts of the content, and we reached thousands of individuals, and we know that we've had people in touch with us who it has had a significant impact on improving their life and getting them into a safe space, but also in raising awareness that domestic abuse isn't something that happens just behind closed doors. It's not something that only happens to other people. but to recognise and to really feel that this is happening in your neighbourhoods and potentially in your families.
Yeah, and it's been a really useful time for us to be able to recognise the value of the digital medium, really, hasn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, obviously, you know, here we are using Zoom, which is what we've had to use throughout in order to stay in touch, to plan our work. But we've also taken another look at the power of social media as a tool, because ultimately our purpose as a company, it's awareness raising, it's education, and it really, you know, thankfully we did have an Arts Council grant that has enabled us to get through this period of time, and that's actually given us the freedom to say, hang on a minute, we have already got some content. What are the ways in which we can use that in perhaps smaller, more bite-sized chunks to still achieve what our mission is, which is ultimately an educational mission. So it's actually been quite useful, hasn't it, to switch our minds into a slightly more digital way of working.
And I think, as you say, that kind of recognition of remote or digital kind of participation or working, and for me, it's probably really changed my idea of what social media is, and to create a positive out of it. I know that often people are quite negative towards social media being all about image, and being quite kind of vacuous in kind of just sort of throwaway comments or lots of judgment. But for us, we've really found that we have we've got a space for a voice and to be heard and people to share and to really kind of grow the reach and the impact of our work. And so it's really kind of that kind of switch from thinking, oh, social media is just about sharing an event or kind of sharing some pictures of what we're up to really being a way to reach people, which is wonderful to know that the work that we're producing has meaning and has value and is recognized.
Exactly, and I guess as a final point, that whole context and the thinking that we've done in response to it inspired us to plan a development of a new project, Child's View project. So that one of the outcomes of that will be an animation, which is obviously something that is digital and therefore digitally shareable. And we're really excited that when we have produced that, we're going to collaborate with a fantastic local arts organisation, Daisy Arts, who have a group of young people, that animation with other young people as a support and awareness raising tool to reach a whole new audience for our educational artwork. And you know, we wouldn't have thought of that approach had it not been for this lockdown period and having to think about how to work digitally. So in many ways it has opened up space for new thinking, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it creates, I think it also helps to create a space where people feel able to approach the subject matter as well. You know, saying domestic abuse, talking about sex and violence, they're not subjects that people want to openly put their hands up and say, yay, let's come to an event to talk about that. No. But I think through the media, which has been amazing, that people are beginning to have those conversations, and sometimes that distance through something digital, through being able to engage in something online, engage in something remotely, has really helped people to, you know, people have had the time to recognise and to listen, and we've had so much going on that has helped us perhaps think a little bit more about our fellow humans. So, you know, we really want to be able to continue the work that we're doing and to help and support as many people as we can.
Absolutely. So thanks again to the Blimey team for giving us space to share a little bit about our subject matter that we work with, our way of working, and thinking as well about the way that has sort of subtly changed through lockdown. I apologise for any moments of the screen freezing or the flow of the conversation being slightly stilted. It's as a result of the Zoom medium. We wanted to give you a true reflection of what our working practice has had to be like for the past 6 months, and those weird kind of connective or disconnecting moments are all part of that process. So thanks very much for listening. Do get in touch if you're interested in working with us. Bye.